Alright, hey guys, and welcome to the very first episode of the Smite Casualcast. The Smite podcast, that's for people that really are just not into the competitive scene of Smite. If you're more into playing Arena and Siege more than you are playing Conquest and getting yelled at all day because you're not doing your role properly, we understand, and that's why we're here for you. So joining me today are my two co-hosts, and I myself am Pete, also known as PeteDorr in-game, and you can find me at youtube.com/PeteDorr. That's PeteDorr, as well as on twitch.tv/PetesGameroom. And my first co-host is Chris, also known as SirCrypt.
Hi everyone, I'm Chris, in-game is SirCrypt, and you can find me at twitch.tv/SirCrypt, SirCrypt. And my other co-host that's going to be with us is Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom. I'm also known as PatsYanksFan in-game.
You might have to explain that name, Tom.
That's because I'm a Patriots and Yankees fan. It's very simple.
Apparently that's a big conflict with a lot of people. I'm not in this sport, so I don't quite understand it myself.
It's very simple. Baseball and football are two different sports.
Well, there you go. So, yeah, so we'll explain the show a little bit more, but basically we conceived this show, or I mostly conceived the idea of coming up with a Smite show that is more centered around the more casual side of things. Not so much, you know, the competitive esports and who's being traded to what team and what's going on with, you know, balance and conquest. As much as we love conquest, I love conquest, we prefer to play more casual game modes like Siege and Arena and just kind of hang out and have fun. And we also want to concentrate more along the lines of helping new players, explaining how to play certain game modes, such as Siege and Arena, what kind of build you want to do in there with gods. Because, you know, if you play a Guardian in Arena, you're going to do a completely different build than you would in Conquest. And we're going to talk about stuff like our favorite, you know, couple of items every episode, a couple of gods we'll talk about. We're kind of just feeling it out from here. We're not really sure on the exact direction of the show, but be sure to leave us your feedback in the comments below on the video to let us know what we can improve upon. But I figured we'd start the show off by kind of introducing how we got into Smite. I myself, I first discovered Smite at PAX East or PAX Prime. I don't remember which one it was. I just remember seeing PAX there on the show floor. They had a relatively small booth, and I don't know, I was just kind of drawn to it. I'd never played a MOBA before, like League of Legends or anything like that. And something about just the third-person view mode, it kind of just reminded me of your typical action game, and I liked the setting of, you know, all the different gods. And I made a mental note in my head to, you know, download the beta when I got home, because at the time Smite was still in beta. And I played Smite right from basically the beginning of it, right when the beta first started. Because I think when I got home, they opened it up like public beta, like right afterwards. So I've been playing the game since it came out for over 2 years. I've taken breaks here and there, but for the most part I've been with it from the start to see all the changes, and that's where I helped get these two in the Smite. So we'll start with Chris. And how did I actually approach you about convincing you to play this game?
Well, you know, you remember that I mean, a long time ago when I used to play World of Warcraft, you know, that was, my main character was always a rogue. So I always would be, you know, ganking Stranglethorn Valley, and that would just be my fun times I would do for hours, is just kill low-level players because I wanted them to cry. But I think, Pete, you showed me Loki in a game once, and you were telling me how much it was like kind of like a rogue character, or kind of typical to what I was doing in World of Warcraft, and I kind of, you know, I was like, I really don't feel like getting into this, I don't want to really do it, Eventually, you know, after watching a little more of the videos that you were sending me, I said, okay, so I downloaded Smite, and this was about over a year ago. Well, I would say maybe even probably a year and a half now. And I've been playing it ever since then, while it was still in beta. This was the time right about when...
Do you remember what the first new god was that was
Tyr just came out.
Okay.
I think Tyr just came out.
That bastard.
Yeah, he's...
Tyr's just one of those gods where I hate him so much that I don't even want to play as him because I hate him that much.
Yeah, he could be a real pain. We'll definitely talk a little bit more about how much Tyr is a...
That's actually one of our segments coming up here.
Yeah.
And Tom, how did we convince you? Because Tom is very peculiar in the kind of games he plays, and to be honest, when Tom first got into Smite, I didn't expect he'd play it for that long at all. So how did we convince you to get into it, Tom?
A lot of convincing.
Well, I started about a year ago. I think Thanatos was the new god when I started. And I found the game pretty boring. And then I stopped playing. I think some other game came out. I think I moved on to Borderlands for a while. And then a couple months later, Nuwa came out. And I really enjoyed playing Nuwa. And that was kind of what got me into the game for real.
Tom was like the only person I knew that actually played old WoW, or, you know, is what she's referred to now because she recently got a remodel. And Tom's actually going to talk about Nuwa later on in the show. But back when Nuwa first came out, she was considered incredibly underpowered. She was considered like one of the worst gods in the game, useless on many levels by players. So Tom got her to Legendary, and that kind of surprised me. He was very skilled with her, but at the time she was considered kind of useless. And then all of a sudden, maybe about 2 months ago, the Smite community realized how completely overpowered she was in Conquest with tower pushing. And then she got not only nerfed, but completely changed into a different character. So that was really interesting. But basically, well, first I just want to give you an outline of the show so you know what to expect here. We're going to be talking about our favorite gods and least favorite gods, both to play as and play against. We're going to talk about what we've been up to in terms of, like, what gods we're leveling to Mastery Rank 10, or what game modes we've been playing a lot. Like, I know Chris has recently gotten into League Joust. We're going to talk about how to play Siege, because that's a game mode that not a lot of players have played yet, and new players are kind of confused on how to approach the game mode. And we're also going to talk about Arena and how you should play Arena, because a lot of new players think of Arena as a deathmatch mode, but really it's much more than that. And we're going to talk about composition for Arena, because that's also really important. And then later on, we've each picked out a god to talk about. We've already spoiled Nuwa, but we'll keep the other gods secret for now, so you'll have to stay tuned to see what gods Chris and I have picked out. Then we're going to talk about 3 items. We figured every episode we'll pick out maybe 3 items to talk about. So we're going to be talking about Spirit Robe, Mystical Mal, and Gem of Isolation. And then we're going to talk about our most memorable noob moments when we got into the game. In other words, mistakes that we made that, you know, just make us look so silly now. And of course we know, well, we've evolved since that point. We don't make those mistakes anymore. And of course, closing to the show. So I guess we'll start with our favorite and least favorite gods, and how about we start with Chris for that one?
You know, off the top of my head, definitely one of my most favorite gods would be Chang'e. She has so much potential to do a lot of damage. You know, you have that free evade that can just be epic when there's an ult coming in. Her ult does a lot of damage, the clear and the heal. Definitely one of my favorite gods. For like really pure burst, Habwa is just sickening on how much burst damage he can do.
And for newer players, we're talking about Hebo, because Habwa is sort of like the way you're supposed to pronounce it, but I'd say 90% of the players out there still call him Hebo, and that's the water god. So don't forget that we're going to approach the show more for newer players in mind. So we will, some of you out there are probably like, of course everybody knows Hebo or Habwa. But we're kind of going into this assuming that there are going to be new players listening, so you'll have to forgive us as we explain some of the obvious for some of you out there.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Because, I mean, he actually said his name was Hebo for the first couple months that he was... I mean, since he was out, he called himself Hebo until they changed him.
Yeah, they remodeled him.
And then he said Habwa. And then I guess another third god I really enjoy for a guardian would be Ares. Ares is... He has just such an amazing amount of damage, crowd control. When you come in and just blink chain somebody, you know, using blink as one of the items to almost to teleport to a certain another spot on the map that's kind of within distance of you. It's just a good feeling.
We should also note, I just want to note, by the way, if you guys are hearing, like, if you're wondering about the audio quality of the show, we are recording this in person, so we're not on Skype, which in the future might change as our schedules change. In this show, we do plan on doing sort of bi-weekly, so not every week. But we're in the same room, which we hope will help add a certain quality to the show. Because it's different when you record on Skype. In person, over time, as we get better at recording this podcast, I think it'll bring a better quality than if we were recording on Skype. Were there any other gods that you...
Well, those are the 3. I guess for some favorites, those were a couple. You know, there's a ton of favorite gods that I really love to play as.
What about Ra?
Ra is an amazing solo laner. I enjoy Poseidon. You know, there's quite a few gods that I really enjoy to play with. And
so which ones do you hate?
The ones I do not like to play
as
at
or
all.
against.
I don't even like to play as. I don't like playing against. First of all, one of them would be, I don't like Zhang Kui. I know he's definitely a good god. I just don't like playing him because he's just... I just don't find him where I need him to be in, like, mid lane or even... Because even though we're talking more about casuals, so even in, like, Siege or Arena, especially in Arena...
Zhang Kui is really bad in Arena. And the reason why, if people aren't sure why Zhang Kui is a really bad pick in Arena, he relies on stacking minions with his abilities. So you hit them with this mark, which applies a slow and a damage over time, but then you also have to use another ability on those minions to absorb their souls, essentially, which gives you extra protections passively, and then they double when you use your ultimate. But because Arena is so much about making sure, and we'll talk about this later, that you're clearing minions, you can't really rely on Zhang Kui to be there to absorb those minions because the rest of your team is also going to be clearing. He can be powerful in Arena if you're like an expert Zhang Kui, but there are much better mage picks than him, like a Poseidon or, I don't know, a Zeus. Like, there's much better mage picks for Arena.
Yeah, Ao Kuang is really good. Mm-hmm. And probably one of the most hated gods is Freya. I do not like playing as Freya. I don't like playing against a Freya. For me, I think the Freya ult and the Freya banished is just too... It's too simple. It's just not... There's not enough skill involved in using Freya for me to even want to play as her. And playing against her is just... It's an automatic... She could be down to very low health ult and then kill you.
She's a glass cannon. She's very auto attack based.
Yeah.
I used to play a lot of Freya when she was first released. An interesting fact is, for those that are newer to the game, it used to be in Smite that you can buy physical items on mages and vice versa. So Freya actually used to be the only hybrid god in the game where she was both physical and magical scaling. So when I first started playing Freya, I built her with like pure attack speed, and everybody always like said, why are you building attack speed on Freya? Just go all magic power. And I did really well with Freya because I built her like she's kind of built now, with a lot of attack speed, with Fatalis and stuff like that. But then, of course, they changed Freya around, and they gave her some buffs and nerfs over the time. And right now she's considered high risk, high reward. But I don't play her anymore.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about it.
And Tom's stepping away for a moment, as I'm sure you heard his wonderful ringtone. So
Classic.
I'll go next. So we do have the Smite client open here, so we don't forget any gods. But first favorite god, I don't really play her much anymore, but Bastet. Some of you that are listening to this might remember me because I became pretty well known in the League arena scene, where before Bastet received her infamous buff and god change, her remodel, I was using Bastet, the old Bastet, in League arena to the point where I was basically the only person that was using her, and it got to the point where she was being banned out when people knew that I was playing because I'd play her to such a high level. And then she got buffed, and then everybody realized how powerful she was, and the buff kind of over-buffed her with her instant jump and instant scratch. So, and then they got rid of League Arena, which really sucks. But I love Bastet. We used to play a lot of Domination before that got taken out. That was one of our favorite game modes, which we really hope gets added back in as a full-time game mode. And maybe in the next episode we'll talk about how to play Domination, since it still does exist in the game in Match of the Day, and it's a very confusing game mode for new players. So maybe we can explain that to you sometime. But Bastet, super powerful. I had about almost 5,000 kills on her until they took away about 2,500 of my kills from Domination. But I have her double legendary, so essentially I have 2,000 worshippers on her. I just love, she's so much fun because of the leap in, leap out mentality. Like, that jump just makes her so much fun. She's not as good as she used to be, though, because of they removed the ability to be crowd control immune when you jump in. So now you jump in as Bastet, you get frozen as like Ymir, you get silenced and all that. Where it used to be you jump in, and then when you hit your jump back button, it just shreds all CC that you had on you, which is no longer there. I should note that I have 10... Currently I have 10 rank 10 gods, so 10 diamond gods. So I have a lot of favorite gods, so I'll kind of go through them fast here. I have rank 10 Aphrodite. She was actually my first legendary, if I remember right, or diamond. I have rank 10 Arachne, rank 10 Ares, rank 10 Bastet, rank 10 Fenrir, which I love, he's just so overpowered. I have rank 10 Hades.
The Hades stage, remember the Hades stage?
God. Back when I discovered I mean, we'll talk about this another time, but I have this knack for playing a god, realizing how completely overpowered they are, breaking them to the point of just ridiculousness, and then a couple of weeks later they just nerf them to hell. Which happened with Hades. God, happened with another god too. I forget who. Let's see, who else do I have rank 10 with?
Well, you got, I think Vulcan was your first, right?
No, he was like my first or second. I don't remember. But I do have rank 10 Vulcan, rank 10 Sun Wukong, rank 10 Vimana, and Vulcan. And I'm working on a couple others right now, like Kabrakan. I have rank 7 and rank 7 Kuba Karna, rank 7 Geb. Yeah, I've got a lot. So but I tend to, I don't play like these guys. I tend to pick one god and just play the hell out of them until I get Mastery 10. But those would be my favorites. I'll talk more about those in depth in future episodes, though. Least favorites, Tyr. Hate him so much I don't even want to play as him.
Hooray, they nerfed him.
Yeah, they kind of nerfed him. I mean, he's still a pain in the ass.
He's still very strong.
I hate Hun bots. Like, he is one of my least favorite guys to play. Like, whenever I get Hun bots in Assault or something, something about his kit I just find completely boring. I just cannot play as Hun bots. I don't like playing as any hunters. I hate ADCs, like, completely. I just am not into the ranged auto attacks with them. Like, it's just not my thing. So I hate any ADC. I don't like switch stances, so I don't like playing as Ullr and Hell especially. And certain assassins like Thanatos, I just can't stand. And that's basically. I mean, I really don't like Odin either. Like, I don't know. There's just something about him. I just don't like his kit at all. So, Tom, what about you? Favorite and least favorite?
All right, my favorite's probably Athena. Her taunt ability, the 2, where she pulls enemies towards her and forces them to auto attack her for a few seconds, is just an incredible ability. You can use it to peel for your teammates. You can use it as initiation. It just makes her a very powerful character just with that one ability alone, especially in game modes like Arena and Siege.
Mm-hmm.
Second was probably Geb. Geb's shield is overpowered. I think a number of people believe that, and it's just one of the best abilities in the game.
Explain the ability for those that aren't too familiar with it, because people realize it's a shield and it gives you extra life, but they might not realize exactly what it does and makes it so powerful.
Alright, Geb's shield giving health is completely irrelevant. What's powerful about Geb's shield is the fact that it removes crowd control. So what you do is you time it on your most important character, whoever's your carry on your team, and as soon as the enemy team engages on them, tries to crowd control them, you put the shield on them, and suddenly their initiation is worthless.
Because what you'll notice a lot of new Geb players do is they'll see a teammate with low health and they'll just automatically throw the shield up. Like, they'll have half health, they'll throw the shield up. Even though that teammate probably didn't need it and they were probably safe. Like, one of my most annoying things in Arena is, like, if I'm running back to the base and I'm safe, they throw the shield on me just because they want to feel like a good support. That's not how you want to play it. And it has a long cooldown.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that you're playing and the enemy Ymir freezes your mage. You know, you pop your shield on them, not only is it going to give them a little bit of extra health, but it removes that crowd control ability. It doesn't work in the sense that if you shield them first and then they get crowd controlled, it'll wipe away the crowd. It doesn't work that way. You have to apply it after the crowd control effect takes effect.
And anything that cleanses CC in Arena is going to be really big, because there's so much potential for CC being happening in Arena that it could be a really big movement saving.
I mean, the shield in general, like, you can't underestimate the extra health that it gives you.
No, definitely not.
Because there's so many. Geb is so annoying, especially if you're like an assassin, like Bastet, where you jump in and you get them down to like that last tick of health, and then Geb just comes around and puts his shield up, and then nope, no kill for you. So he's completely annoying.
It's not annoying. It's actually awesome.
What are some of your other favorite gods? Because Tom, we should note that Tom loves to play support type guardians. He's not really into. Well, I mean, he plays a little bit of everything, but he's more into the support type role.
I also enjoy playing Sun Wukong. Sun Wukong has pretty good peel potential with his Tiger Stun and his Ox form for the knockup. He's very hardy. You can just press 4 whenever you're in trouble and run away for free. You can use your 72 transformations to turn into a bird, fly away. So you can put yourself in a lot of risky positions and not really pay for it with Sun Wukong, just because of the number of escapes he has.
He's one of the hardest gods to kill in the game. So if you're ever playing against the Sun Wukong and they have low health and they're getting away, just turn around. Don't chase for the kill unless you know you can have it guaranteed, like if you're playing as another speedy god like Nemesis or something. Because Sun Wukong, not only doesn't he have his ultimate, but that transformations where he can turn into the bird, like, you're just not going to catch him, so just don't even worry about it.
And as previously noted, I'm also a big fan of New Wa, particularly before she was changed into her current form.
What did you like about Old Wa so much, though, that drew you to the character?
How unique her kit was. She's not her old kit was not like any other characters in the game. The fog, the clay soldiers, the flame strike being such an incredible skill shot, and then just the ultimate. It was formerly Pillars of Heaven, and you'd basically create a rectangle in the field, and anyone who crossed it would take damage and be slowed for a period. And people didn't really understand how you could really change a team fight by placing that properly.
And if you play, I mean, Nuwa was a hard character to grasp. I mean, there was a lot going on in her kit. But one of the most powerful things is once you get the full combo off, you get double auto, or you used to get double auto attack damage. And like she would just be able to shred towers. But not only that, but just her auto attacks were so damaging the players. So before the Polynomicon nerf, like her auto attacks were devastating. It's really disappointing that they changed the character that much, because right before they changed her, I was getting into Nuwa myself and found her to be a lot of fun. Who else do you like? Anyone else?
Well, talking about the Nuwa, it was extremely enjoyable in the first, 2 weeks, the Nuwa Fenrir combo, that you would grab people, you would ult as Fenrir, grab the individual, and just keep going back and forth across the electric wires.
The shake and bake, I believe.
And they would just die instantly. So that was a lot of fun to do,
kind
too.
of nerfed that combo. I miss Old Wow. Maybe they'll bring her... Man, they won't. Hyros won't. Basically, in this game, when the pro players complain enough, they change things, and it's probably not going to come back. It's unfortunate. Because don't forget, they balanced this game around conquest, so any kind of overpowered combos that players might discover in other game modes don't really apply, because they balance it around conquest. Anyone else, Tom?
Other favorites, I enjoy playing Bacchus and Ares, just as other guardians with very good initiation. And particularly with Ares, the ability to interrupt enemy team escapes. So you can kind of secure kills for your team or steal them.
And Ares he's less of a tank. He's more of like a magical bruiser.
Yeah, definitely.
Because he doesn't really have peel. And when you think of a tank / support / guardian, they have to have peel of some sort. So like Athena Taunt, Ymir Freeze, Geb Shield, or his 2, whatever the 2 is.
Shockwave.
Shockwave, yeah.
Yeah, it knocks people up.
Yeah.
Serves as
Ares doesn't have any kind of ability like that. His chains, yes, they slow an opponent, but it doesn't really stop them from catching... Well, it's not really peel. What are your least favorite gods to play?
Well, as Pete mentioned, I'm primarily a support player, so I hate assassins who like to 1-0 people I'm trying to protect.
So like Naja.
Naja is not as bad, because Naja is counterable. You press beads on the ult and the sash and things like that. But someone like Loki, it's very hard to stop a good Loki player who's just going after one of your mages.
Love Loki.
SirCrypt, recently very powerful. In the right hand, SirCrypt is one of the most powerful gods in the game. Not a fan of Mercury either, because Mercury can miss every single one of his abilities and still 1-0 you, 100-0 you with auto attacks in about 3 seconds.
What about Osiris?
Osiris, pre-nerfs, was about the same, but I think they did a good job between the Quinn size nerf and his auto attack progression slowdown. They've made him a bit more fair.
So I guess we'll move on to what we've been up to, which is essentially like if there have been certain gods we've been working on or game modes that we've been playing quite a bit of. I myself, it's been pretty uneventful. I've just been grinding the hell out of Cabrakan. There's just something about him that I really love. I'm almost rank 8 with him right now, but I'll talk about him in a little bit later on. Game modes, not so much. I haven't been playing too much Arena, just a lot of Siege. Siege is like my go-to game mode right now. It's very aggravating, though, if you don't play with a full pre-made of 4 people. Lately in Siege, I just haven't been having luck with the randoms I get paired with. I've also been working on a lot of Thor. I used to play Thor when he first came out, back when, if you can believe it, he didn't have a teleport on his hammer throw, he didn't have a stun on his wall, and I somehow still managed to do really well with him back in the day. And I really haven't played him since they changed him. For the better. I mean, having a teleport and a stun and all that stuff is really good on Thor, but I just recently started playing it again and realized how overpowered he is. Like, level 3 in Siege, if you level your hammer twice and your wall once, or even just like level 3 hammer early on, and you hit somebody with it and get the back hammer damage on it too, like you double hit them, they're down to like a third of their health. Like, Thor is
it's strong.
So powerful early game. other than that, I've been working on a little bit of Sobek, and eventually I'm going to get around to getting Diamond on Kumbhakarna and Geb. It's just a matter of time when I feel like playing them. Supports for me, except for Kabrakan, are just, after playing them like back to back to back constantly, it just gets to be really kind of boring sometimes, so taking a break from those. What about you, Chris?
Recently, I actually just started playing Joust League. I never did Joust League before because I was really never interested in it. You know, I did the Conquest League. I did Arena League for a while until obviously that disappeared. But Joust League is kind of something I've been playing recently for fun. You know, it adds a lot of. There's a lot of things you see when you're playing one-on-one with someone. So there's no one to back you up. There's no one's going to come in and save you, or there's no ganks in the sense that someone else is going to, ambush. So when you play one-on-one with somebody, you really see how a certain god can be worked and how you can counter certain gods and buy certain items to counter items that they may have. So it's a really fun game mode when you really, look into it in depth. Other than that, it's just been siege mode with Peter and with Tom. The three of us will usually, or if we can get another person from our clan in there, the four of us will go and do 4v4 in siege, because that seems to be the game mode to really play right now. That adds a lot of fun and not that much particular roles to pick.
Have there been any certain gods you've been working on lately? Because I know you just got Diamond and Ra recently.
Yeah, I got Diamond and Ra. So Ra was just finished. At the moment, I have not had anyone. I mean, Aphrodite is about to hit level 5. I use Aphrodite a lot if I am playing Conquest as a solo, because I think her in solo is just beyond amazing. So I'll definitely use Aphrodite a lot. And other than that, just been picking up a couple other gods to play around with. Poseidon has been a lot of fun. They've been using in 3v3. That's also a joust, but with 2 other teammates. But other than that, I think those are pretty much the gods I've been kind of working on in the joust 1v1. How about you, Tom?
Well, ever since they removed Arena League from the game, I haven't really had a preferred game type. So I'll float around between every game type. But recently, I've been playing Ares a bit, just because already a legendary Geb and a legendary Athena. So I was trying to learn a new Guardian that is competitive. And Ares is particularly strong in the Arena game type. And trying to relearn Nuwa. I feel obligated. I don't like the Nuwa, but I feel obligated being a legendary Nuwa to actually understand how she plays.
Kind of sucks when Hi-Rez changes a god completely and then keeps your stats and mastery level the same, because people see you as a legendary Nuwa and they assume that you're going to be really good with that character, but they might not realize that, hey, you got legendary on the old Nuwa, not the new one, so it's like you're playing a brand new character.
It's a brand new character at this point.
Yeah. Which it's going to be interesting because there's a couple of god changes coming up apparently for gods like Arachne and Ao Kuang, so we'll see how that goes.
And Odin, I hear.
And Odin too, yeah. Which I think he's either going to become a magic caster with his staff, or he's going to summon. He's going to have summonable minion, something, because there was a spoiler that apparently somebody guessed what the new Odin is going to be, and there were only 2 guesses in the chat or something. Apparently, it was either a mage or having a pet. So it's going to be one of those. I'm leaning towards Mage Odin. I really think he's going to be magical based, so we'll see. Maybe he's going to be a true guardian. Not so much a mage, but a guardian. Alright, so now we're going to move on to our first sort of big discussion on a game mode, and that's how to play Siege. We'll try and keep it relatively short because we're going to be doing a lot of discussion of Siege in general in future episodes. But this is more for players that have never played Siege before and have no idea going in what to do exactly. Or maybe you play Siege, but you might not know really how to play Siege. So I guess we'll start with composition. You don't really need a Guardian in Siege, at least in casual Siege. Maybe if you're doing 4-man pre-mades, possibly, because chances are the other team might have a Guardian. But the fun thing about Siege is that you can really go in with some non-traditional lane comps. So Siege is 4 versus 4, so you're going to have 2 people in a lane, 2 people in the other lane. You can, as long as you balance it and have 2 magic based and 2 physical based, you'll be okay. Starting off, you're gonna want to start at the buff. So 2 people will go to the red buff, 2 people will go to the speed buff. Typically, it's in my opinion that the ADC or the ranged character or the person that's going to be doing the clearing in the lane should get blue. And that the tank or, the other character should get the speed or the red. As much as that might seem weird to say give a tank speed, I think it makes more sense to give the ADC, or in this case, for those that don't know what that means, it's basically the ranged characters like Apollo or Artemis or Neith or something like that. Give them blue because they're going to be using their abilities more to clear the wave, which is more beneficial. You don't want to start at blue, you want to start at red and speed and then make your way to blue afterwards because it's more efficient, it's faster to get into lane from there. Make sure that you communicate with your team before the game starts and let them know what lane you're going to go to, because there can be some confusion at the start where both pairs of two players will start moving towards either the left or the right, and that kills valuable time. Because believe it or not, seconds matter in getting to lane and getting that extra couple of minion kills that will put you ahead of the other team.
Especially if you can get there before the opposing. Just that extra wave is going to give you your ults before they do, and that can clear that lane before you can kill that lane off before they do. So
after you clear the camps and you move into lane, basically the biggest thing about Siege is tickets. And Tom, do you want to explain how the tickets work in that?
Siege tickets work very similar to arena tickets in that the player really needs to focus on securing last hits that kill minions. And each time you kill a minion, you'll get 1 ticket towards spawning a siege engine, which is that giant creature that spawns at 100 points. And the other way to do it is each jungle buff, the small minions are worth 2 points and the large minion is worth 5 points. And the idea is you want to basically race the opposing team to getting to that 100, spawn a siege engine, and use that siege engine to destroy the towers as quickly as possible.
And it's important when you're playing like more advanced tactics. If you ever get a chance to go into the enemy jungle and kill their buff camps, you're essentially not only giving your team 9 more tickets, but you're taking 9 tickets away from the enemy team.
And their buff.
Yeah, and their buff. So don't underestimate taking the enemy buffs. I mean, what's a smart thing to do, like say you kill two enemies or 3 enemies and you're close to their base, maybe push down a tower, don't overcommit, and then go into their jungle, steal a couple of buffs if they're up, and then do the or I don't even know what you'd call the middle. People call it the Gold Fury because they don't really have a name for it yet, but it's think of it as the boss that spawns in the middle of the map. So it's like the Gold Fury and the Fire Giant, only it's the siege version, where if you kill it, it'll grant your team an automatic siege minion that'll help push towers down. And those are really important because you can, at your base, you can teleport into the portal when one is up and automatically warp to the one that's furthest on the map. So if you have 2 up, it's going to port you to the one that's closest to the enemy base. But it's very important to clear that objective, but don't... The thing about Siege is that you can't buy wards, except for sentry wards, which are pretty expensive, so those are 125 gold. So don't commit to that middle fury unless you are sure that the enemy team is oblivious, or unless you have it warded, because chances are if you try and fight that thing, the enemy team is going to collapse on you, and they're probably going to deicide your team, because you're going to be low on health from tanking this thing if it's earlier on in the game.
Okay, so that'll be a deicide on your team, and then they're going to steal the Fury, and so they're going to get another siege. So it's really important to even talk with your teammates on getting ready to attack this thing, because you all have to collapse on it at once, attack it, get it done, hand it, and get out.
Well, you brought up hand. It's very important to make sure someone on your team has been buying Hand of Gods also, because that'll allow you to instant kill the siege spawner in the middle of the map as soon as
Level
it reaches
3 Hand of Gods.
yellow health. You typically, the player doing that wants to have Hand of Gods finished around the 4 or 5 minute mark, because that's typically when teams are going to start looking to engage for that objective.
It spawns at the 3 minute mark, but honestly, the only conceivable way that you'd want to try and fight it at 3 minutes into the game is if you have an Arachne, because Arachne is, well, the current Arachne before she gets changed. Arachne is very overpowered in Siege, especially for taking down the mid Gold Fury. Because if you lay down a couple of eggs with her, you can solo that thing 3 minutes into the game, no problem. I've done it with Arachne. If you lay down a couple of eggs, using her 2, which is a silence and lifesteal, actually prevents it from attacking entirely. And you can leash the Fury onto your spiders, so if you're taking damage, you can leash it and pass the aggro onto the spiders. And leashing essentially if you pay attention to buff camps or any boss encounter areas or objective areas with minions, you'll see sort of like a border with stones in the ground, typically. And if you step outside that range, it's going to leash any aggro that was on you into anything else within that circle still that is damaging it. So that's also important to keep in mind for buff camps. Where early on you're going to want to leash the buff camps onto your teammates so that you don't take the brunt of the damage. You want to kind of split it evenly. Other than that, like, what are other tips that you guys?
Well, talking about Arachne, as a really good potential god in Siege. What else do you guys think that are really some really good gods that really fit well with the Siege model?
Anyone with global ults, so someone like Apollo that can split push with his ultimate. I don't know, like, I feel like Nuwa is really strong in Siege because she has the ultimate which gives global, like, vision. So when she ults, not only does she damage everybody on the enemy team, but it also grants vision of where everybody is. And considering that wards are very expensive in Siege, it's kind of powerful to have that vision. Thor is really powerful just for his gank potential.
I mean, there's some really good comps in Siege, and what you'll see in Siege is, if you play with a friend, you're gonna be going up against 2s and 2s, so you're gonna see some sort of comparable lane. So like what me and Pete used to do is Pete would go Arachne and I would go Habwa, and Pete would build all his eggs on the side of the up front, wait for them to come up, pull them, and I would 3 and ult them, and they're instantly dead. It's just an amazing composition, especially in lane, for early ganks and just clear, especially with Arachne.
Siege allows you to have some really overpowered compositions that wouldn't be possible in game modes like Conquest, because Conquest, it's more like cookie cutter. If you're in the duo lane, yeah, you're most likely 95% of the time going to be fighting a typical Guardian and Hunter. Whereas in Siege, that's not typical, so you can get away with having a Habwa and an Arachne in the same lane, because chances are you might be fighting an Assassin and a Mage, so you can get away with weird compositions like that. Whereas in Conquest, you can't really get away with Habwa Arachne against a true dual lane.
And I think that's what adds a lot of fun to it, is just figuring out those, and there's a lot of compositions you could do, and just kind of finding those little compositions to just annoy the other people.
Fenrir Ao Kuang. That comp that you played against the other day with Naja Janus.
Naja Janus was amazing. Naja would ult, and as I was coming down to my death, I would go through the whole of Janus, and then die when I hit the ground. So it's just an amazing... There are different types of compositions that really work out that are just so much fun. I know that you guys do a different comp, right, with Kumba?
Kumba is really good in Siege, but I play him complete mage, but I'll talk about him in another episode. But one time Tom and I did, Mage Geb and Mage Athena rushing Mystical Mail in the same lane. Using 2 Guardians with decent lane clear, because Athena and Geb both have decent lane clear for a Guardian. Rushing Mystical Mail on them to help with clear as well. The damage was unreal. We were destroying basically anybody we went up against, except for one team. But for the most part, every game we played just trashed on anybody we played against with that composition.
Another thing to look for in characters is just high mobility. The ability to get from lane to lane through the very large jungle
Fast that's really good.
is very important in Siege. Just being able to rotate quickly to the aid of your teammates and taking advantage of any people who overextend in lane on your enemy team.
Like Janus is really good in Siege too because of his ult. So you can easily get to the other side of the map if a Siege minion spawns or something. I mean, honestly though, Siege is not like Conquest where it's that's the fun of it. Conquest gods like Arachne and Anubis, for the most part, are not the best gods. I mean, you can play them well. If you know how to play the god, you can just destroy people. But in Siege, it's you can really play any god, any composition. That's the fun of it. I mean, same thing in Arena, but even more so for Siege. So you can play any god you want. Don't take our advice. Play anybody you want in Siege. It's just that certain ones work a little bit better than others. I mean, that about does it for Siege. We'll talk more about it in the future. We don't want to harp on it for too long. We'll move on to Arena now. What I mostly want to focus on Arena, though, is distilling that sort of thought process for newer players that Arena is nothing but deathmatch. So we'll kind of explain how that works. and maybe just composition for Arena and kind of what you have to build for a team in Arena and what gods really work well in Arena and what gods are just not ideal for Arena. So Tom plays a lot of Arena. I think he has the most Arena play out of all of us, almost 1,000 matches. So we'll let Tom kind of explain Arena for you.
So Arena, your primary objective is to reduce the enemy tickets from 500 to 0. And there's a couple ways you can do this. One is, of course, by getting enemy kills. And each kill of an enemy player is a deduction of 5 tickets from their score. But more importantly, you want to secure last hits on each of the minions that spawn. And they basically charge towards the middle of the map every, say, 20 or 30 seconds. Every time a player secures a last hit on a minion, it deducts 1 ticket from the enemy team. So a wave of 6 minions, you can be deducting 6 tickets, which is actually worth more than a single kill every 20 to 30 seconds from the enemy team. And the other ways of scoring points are to get your minions from your side of the map into a portal that appears in the middle of the enemy base on their side of the map, or every 10 kills there'll be a tower that spawns, and that tower, if you can escort it across the map into the enemy portal, you'll also receive a 10 ticket deduction.
I think it's like essentially getting that into the enemy portal, which is difficult to do. It usually doesn't happen. It's basically like getting 2 kills to your team. And something that I wanted to bring up, where sometimes my team will get mad at me, like say a team fight breaks out and I'm out of mana, or I don't really have much, or I can't contribute much, or I'm low on health. And I know that if I run to the team fight, I'm not going to be able to contribute much, let alone I'll probably die based on how things are looking. My team will get mad at me if I instead decide to go mid, clear the wave of minions, and then retreat. They'll get mad thinking that I didn't come help or whatnot, but what they don't realize is I essentially just got the team the equivalent of 2 kills because I cleared the enemy wave instead of letting it just sit there and losing those points. And I maybe even pushed our wave into their portal, which is like getting a few more kills. So in a way, it's not always... It's kind of situational, but sometimes it's best to just leave your team fight alone when it looks dire and you're not going to be able to contribute much. And it's better off, especially if you're a mage, to just lay down one ability and clear that wave and go back to base.
I think when you looked at Arena League, there was almost not even that much PvP fighting for the first couple minutes. It was kind of really getting the buffs, really setting and getting the minions down, and it was really focused on minions. And then you would, engage when necessary. But the minions are really the most important part of Arena, and if you need to leave a team fight, or you see a team fight that's about to break out and you need to leave to go clear some minions, you should do so. Especially if they're going to go into your portal.
That's why it's important, like, composition-wise. You need a good lane clear mage, so like Ao Kuang or Poseidon or anything like that. Mages like Zeus, as good as he is in Arena in general, you probably want another mage to go with him because early game his clear is not good. He's not going to be able to clear every minion. You're going to want a Guardian, so gods like Ares really stand out, even though he's best paired with another Guardian as well because he doesn't really do the absolute best job of killing for his team. You're going to need a Guardian. Basically, if you play Arena, unless you're like a group of pro players playing together, and if you don't pick a Guardian and the enemy team has a Guardian, you're probably going to lose, unless the enemy Guardian is really bad. Typically, the typical setup is Guardian, 2 mages, 2 physicals, like a bruiser and a ranged, or a bruiser and an assassin or something like that. Other than that, you don't really want to underestimate the power of the buffs. Sure, buffs don't give you ticket or take away tickets for the enemy team, but they do grant you extra experience and extra gold, which can really add up. And something else that you don't want to underestimate, when your mage, say an Ao Kuang, moves up a little bit, kind of deep, puts a tornado down on the enemy minions and walks away, try and get as close to the minions as you can, because if you're too far away, you're going to miss out on essential experience and gold. So whenever possible, try and stay within range so that you're not missing out on the experience and gold. And if you are a mage or anybody that can clear well, try, if you can, to wait until your team catches up before you clear the wave so that they get that experience and gold instead of you just getting it all for yourself.
And that goes for in any game mode that in Smite that you should be doing that.
Like if you want to play a good support, just going back to like any game mode in general, if you can hold the wave, like if you see your teammate is coming back to lane and he'll be there relatively soon, try and tank up the damage if you can from the minions and hold them outside of the tower range. That way you don't get the gold reduction, whereas if the tower had attacked them.
Another consideration for Arena is that the respawn timers are significantly shorter in Arena than any other game type, which means you can kill the entire enemy team and they'll be back alive in 5 seconds. You don't really want to chase enemies across the map towards their base because they will have reinforcements coming in less than 10 seconds to help them out, and chances are you're going to find yourself in a situation where there's 5 enemies and you're the only one there and you die.
Something important about Siege 2, Tom, if you want to explain it, is end game when it comes down to the last 20 tickets.
You're talking about Arena, right?
Arena, yeah.
It's the last 10 tickets.
Or 10. Yeah.
When you reach that point where there's only 10 tickets left on either your score or the enemy score, the scoring on minion kills actually changes. So you no longer receive 1 ticket deduction for each minion you secure a last hit on. It becomes only the large minion. He's basically the gladiator minion. He's slightly taller than the others and he's a melee style. He's the only one who counts towards ticket reduction. So for those last 10 tickets, you really want to look to actually kill enemy players and engage on their team.
Him being 1 ticket per wave.
Right, the gladiator minion.
Right, 1. So you can go, if you're on the last 10 tickets, each wave, you have essentially 10 waves, with the exception of no players dying to get back to where you have to go. So if you're a little behind, that's when you start to defend majorly. You stay behind and you just kind of clear waves, because they're going to have to, the only way they can get points right now is either killing a player or killing 10 gladiators.
10 waves.
Yeah, 10 waves. So that comes down to really good crunch time to really defend. If you have to turtle a little bit, turtle until you're about even.
If you're within 30 tickets of the enemy team by the end of the game, you can come back from that just by stalling out, accepting your 6 tickets per minion wave, and trying to avoid engagements with the enemy team until you get to a more comparable score.
That's where the biggest comebacks come in Arena. It's when it gets to that last few couple of minutes.
We've had some really, really good comebacks where we were maybe behind like 50 tickets or so, and we just waited and waited, and then eventually you're going to have to find a good opportunity to engage, and you have to find, it's pretty much a one and done. You have to find a good opportunity, and you all have to bank on that opportunity, because if you get killed, if one of you guys get killed, that's it, it's over.
I mean, there's some really advanced tactics for Arena that honestly kind of takes some of the fun out of the game mode. And is probably why it's no longer really streamed in the competitive scene of Smite, because, you know, the competitive teams kind of figured this out and exploited it. But if you want to make Siege, I mean, Arena really boring and competitive as possible, you want to deny the enemy team points. So you don't want to, basically what you want to do is you want to go mid, and you don't want to immediately clear the enemy wave. You want their minions to last your minions. So that way, that's one less minion that the enemy team can kill to get a point off of your score. It might be a little hard to understand what I'm saying, but essentially, if one of the enemy, if you get one of your minions to last hit one of the enemy team minions, that's good for you, bad for them, because that's one less point, essentially. If you can understand what I'm trying to say.
But usually people are way too jittery in Arena.
These types of tactics really stall out the game and tend to remove some of the fun from it.
Yeah. I mean, Arena, essentially, when it comes down to it, yeah, it's still a deathmatch game mode, but you just got to keep into consideration the minions.
Minions play a major role along with killing other players.
Alright, so now we're going to move on to... We've each picked out a god to talk about, and that's what we're going to do in every episode. We'll each pick out a god to talk about. I have picked out Cabrakan to talk about for this episode. I've been playing a hell of a lot of Cabrakan. I actually almost have 100 games played of him. My win-loss ratio is about even. It's like 50%. Almost rank 8 with him. He is a guardian, and it took me a really, really long time to kind of learn how to play this god. I still have the general consensus that he is the weakest god in the game. And some of you might have read my guide on Reddit. I posted the Reddit guide advice from a rank 5 Cabrakan, where I spelled Cabrakan wrong, and apparently some people were very upset about that.
Those are the people who believe in Cabrakan.
Those are the same people that think Naja is a girl. Alright, so I spelled Cabrakan with a K.
Naja is not a girl?
No.
Oh.
He just sounds like one.
And still kind of looks like one, but... so Cabrakan... I've played him in Conquest. He's god-awful in Conquest. So, most of my experience is based upon Siege for the most part, with some Arena. If you play him in Arena, you're gonna want to play him with another Guardian. I build him more like a magical bruiser. So typically, if I'm playing against a team with 2 very strong physicals, we'll use Siege as an example. say there's like a Apollo or a, you know, just any strong physical. 2 strong physicals, I'll typically rush Mystical Mail. And then from there, I'll go into Guardian Boots, which are the tank boots, which are very underrated, especially on Cabrakan. And those grant extra movement speed out of combat, which I think is like 30% movement speed out of combat. And 30% crowd control reduction. So it's like a Magi's Blessing minus an extra 10% without the crowd control bubble.
And I think that's a great item as well, because you can just how fast he can run with speed buff on him to get into a team fight.
Yeah, because Cabrakan's 1 is a speed buff where he gets like how much movement? 35 movement speed at max rank, and then your next physical melee hit is a stun. So you pair that with the guard boots or any other movement speed items, and Cabrakan is just like one of the fastest characters in the game.
Yeah, he's darting.
Like it feels like you use sprints with your 1 like every 15, 17 seconds. And then after that, I typically build like Soul Reaver as my second item. Soul Reaver on him I think is just essential because Soul Reaver, for those that don't know, every 60 seconds I think it is, you get 15% of the max enemy's health is dealt in extra damage. So say you smack any squishy mage in the face and let's just say they have 1,000 health, it's going to do 150 extra damage, which is a significant amount of damage on top of the damage from his other abilities.
Right.
From there, Gemma Isolation's kind of core on him, and you know you can kind of build whatever you want. Movement speed is good on him, so Witchblade. But other than that, the biggest tip I can give for people willing to try out Cabrakan: put 1 point into your 3. Level your 1 first, because the damage from that and the movement speed is going to far outweigh any extra damage or protections from your 2. The way I level him is 1 first, then the 2, then the 3, and then the ult last. The reason why, the biggest mistake that a lot of Cabrakan players make is they level their 3 first, which is what I was doing for a very long time. And the reason why you don't want to do that is it drains your mana so much. And his 3 is the Tremors ability, so it's going to create that AoE effect where you're going to like, you kind of lose control of your character. It's almost like a mini Hades ult, where it kind of like draws you in a way and damages you over time a little bit. But the problem with that ability is he can be crowd controlled out of it by anything, like silence, knockback, anything. He's crowd control out of it. Has a very low cooldown, however, so you can kind of use it again really fast. But the reason why you only want to put 1 point in the beginning, it's only going to cost you 30 mana per second, as opposed to, say, once you get it to max rank, 70 mana per second. The damage increase is not that significant. And you want to use it more as disruption and sort of like a crowd control ability, not so much for damage. Your damage you want to come from your 1 and your 2, but especially your 1. He definitely needs some work. His ultimate is almost useless. I won't go into it too much, but buy Blink on him, blink in and initiate with your 1, and make sure that you're buying Soul Reaver on him. Like, that will really help you out a lot.
Did you want to talk about like the Curse and the Tremors kind of combo?
I don't really use that too much anymore, like Weakening Curse in the Tremors. I don't know, I find when you have Blink, you still kind of either need Hand of the Gods or just something else other than Weakening Curse. I don't know. Like, it works, but I think once you get Gem of Isolation up, the Weakening Curse is sort of less efficient. That can happen. I know you too, especially Tom. Tom's only played him in the public test server, but he doesn't think he's a great god, as do 99% of the Smite players out there. He needs some work, I know that. But why do you not like Cabrakan, Tom?
Well, I'm a bit of a Guardian player, so the peeling and initiation are the 2 primary reasons you take a Guardian, and Cabrakan really lacks both. His 1 is more of an escape. It's a single target stun, so you're not really going to use it to initiate a team fight. You're going to use it more to escape crowd control from the enemy team, or maybe try to peel for a player who's being attacked. But
here's the thing about Cabrakan, like, a lot of other Guardians do have that potential to initiate a team fight, like with Athena blink in, or not blink in, but like dash in and taunt. Sometimes you can get 2 or 3 people taunted. Ymir, same thing with his freeze or his ult, or, you know, even Geb blinks in Cataclysms.
Bacchus, you get
Bacchus, like, they all have these huge, even Ares. Whereas Cabrakan, if you blink in and use your 1, that's just a single person stun.
Every other Guardian has a multi-target crowd control ability.
I mean, Cabrakan kind of does. He has his 2, but the AoE on that is not large, and it's situational in the fact that you have to take 5 hits from any source of damage to have a stun on it. So you can't really blink in and use that because you're not going to have any damage on you, obviously, if you're blinking in. He has this 3, which is, it would be a great initiation, except for the fact that as soon as you go in and use that, you're going to get crowd controlled out of it right away. And then his ult is probably the most useless ult in the game because the walls, not only is it hard to land properly, but the walls can be knocked down in like a second. Like, they're useless.
Not only that, but your teammates also do not know where the walls are going to appear. So they can be just as much of a detriment to your own teammates as they are to the enemies if you accidentally wall your team into one of the enemy's AoE attacks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's about all I want to say for Cabrakan for now. He needs a lot of work. He's fun, that's why I still play him. I just enjoy his kit a lot. And I've gotten him to the point now where I'm pretty decent with him. Like, I've kind of gotten his kit down where I can definitely contribute and feel like I'm actually contributing to the team. But I'll tell you, I'll be excited when I have him rank 10 and they make some necessary changes to him where he's completely overpowered, because then I'll have a lot of fun with him. What they probably have to do is either swap his ult and his 3 so that his 3 is actually his ultimate and he's crowd control immune, or... I mean, I don't know, like, lower his cooldown on his 1 maybe, so it's not 17 seconds, so that he can get more stuns off more frequently. I don't know, we'll revisit him in another episode, but next, I guess we'll have Tom talk about Nuwa.
So, I guess we've spent a lot of time talking about the old Nuwa, so we can spend some time talking about the new Nuwa. And, her passive is, similar to Apollo's, in that Apollo, it's 10 successful auto attacks, gives him a buff. With Nuwa, it's 5. And when you land 5 successful auto attacks, your 6th attack, whether it hits or misses, will have a root applied to it. And what a root does is it basically just holds the enemy character in place for a second and a half. So when you're playing Nuwa, you'll typically want to do your auto attacks on whatever wave you're working to clear. And when you hit that 6th one, you switch to whoever the enemy player is across from you and attempt to land your root on that player. Her second ability... well, her first ability, not her passive, is Mysterious Fog. It's a low damage ability that grants movement speed to Nuwa while she's inside it, and it also conceals her location from the enemy team. So you can basically stay within the fog, and they will not know exactly where in the fog you are, other than that you are in that giant fog circle. It works for your teammates as well. So this ability sometimes is good to help your teammates escape if they're in trouble. You can use it, and it does area damage, so you can use it to zone the enemy team out of locations if you want to deny space or control over the minion wave from them.
I don't know if they changed this, but I think it also used to give, like, stealth to the siege tower, the towers in arena.
Yes.
I don't know if they
I don't know if they patched it. I think the intent is, but you can use it to stealth objectives also. Her second ability is Clay Soldiers. She basically spawns at the low levels 1 and then at the higher levels up to 3 Clay Soldiers that'll appear in front of her, and then they'll do a dash towards the nearest enemy player. And they'll do basic auto attacks, which reduce their protections, the enemy player's magical protections. And what's more important is this actually combos with her 3, which is called Shining Metal. And Shining Metal is a very low cooldown, high burst ability that can be used to detonate these Clay Soldiers, stunning anyone next to them. It's a circle AoE, and dealing considerable burst damage, almost on par with Hebo. Or Hubwa, excuse me, in terms of magical damage. Her third ability is a straight line burst, the Shining Metal, which I refer to, and besides exploding her minions, it also is a good tool to clear the wave. And don't be afraid to just use it to damage enemies. It has a very low cooldown, so it'll be up every 5 to 6 seconds.
It's really powerful.
Cooldown, and it does a lot of damage. Finally, her ultimate is Fire Shards.
The biggest skill shot in the game.
Yes, indeed.
Requires a lot of skill. You press 4 and you kill steal your teammates.
It's essentially like a global Neath ultimate without the stun.
Basically, it's going to hit all the enemies for low damage at first, but the scaling on it, despite being nerfed a number of times, it still does damage end of the game when you're level 20 and have a full magic build.
Something about it, though, that a lot of people forget or they just neglect and don't even realize is that it gives global vision. So if you're playing Conquest And your Nuwa uses that. It's going to give you a vision of everybody on the map, so you'll be able to see where the jungler is, where people are rotating to. So even if you don't want to just finish somebody off and you just want to see where the enemy jungler is, you can use that. It won't be as efficient, but if you don't have enough ward coverage and you really want to know if you're out of position, you can use it for that too.
Putting Soul Reaver on Fire Shards and using that means Soul Reaver is going to hit all 5 people?
No, the highest health person.
It goes to highest health? Because I remember, I think there was a glitch before where someone was able to do it with all 5 people.
They've since patched it.
That's amazing.
One other consideration, though, from someone who's been playing a lot of New WoW lately, is that you actually don't really want to use this ability to try to kill steal your teammates or secure kills. This ability shines best when other enemies attempt to engage on you. Because you can just launch up into the air. You'll disappear from whatever crowd control abilities they attempted to use and deal damage to the enemy team, which actually serves as a better initiation.
It's also not like a Rama ult or a Naja ult where you ult up in the air and it's predictable where you're going to come down, because before Nuwa uses this ult as a targeter on the ground, where wherever she targets before she goes up in the ult, that's where she's going to land. So it's a bit unpredictable where she's going to come down after the ability. So she can essentially use this as an escape. Like Tom said, where if you're in trouble, use it and you might get out of the bad initiation from the enemy team.
That, and it's always important to consider that your enemy team, if you're using this ability, should have used some of their abilities on you and not your teammates. So if you're able to avoid the damage, you're now at an advantage in the team fight against the enemy team, because they've spent some of their cooldowns trying to kill you and you've essentially escaped and dealt damage to them.
Yeah, it's so
Nuwa OP in
conclusion. Nuwa has been pretty strong. I'm going to talk about, this was the guy that really I kind of fell in love with, and I still play her a lot. She's just so viable with everything, and that is really Chang'e. Chang'e is my favorite solo. I play her in Arena. You can play her in Siege. You can play her on 1v1 Joust. She is a very high-ranked god, and she went through quite a few changes, especially with her healing. I was playing Chang'e when her healing didn't do damage. It was just a heal, but her healing wasn't anywhere on par with the other heroes, such as Hel, or especially Aphrodite or Ra. So I've been playing Chang'e for a long time. To start off, her passive is the rabbit, and the rabbit is amazing, especially in Conquest, because the rabbit can go and buy items for you. So I used to sit in 3v3 Joust and never leave the lane. I'd never had to leave the lane because I just had the rabbit buy for me, and I would have maybe even 1 or 2 blue pots. I know that's rare for me to buy pots, but I would just stay in that lane. Also, the Jade Rabbit also gives you the 25% movement speed with no backpedal penalty. Backpedaling is when you are moving backwards, like you're moonwalking backwards. You're facing forward, you're moving backwards. This adds so much potential to how Chang'e can move, because using her one ability, you can literally dance around people. So her first ability is Crescent Moon Dance. It's an arc-like move, and it can do some very high potential damage. Here's the reason the backpedaling helps with this. You can start to move forward, now you have that 25% movement speed plus no backpedaling, and move backwards. So it's almost like you're floating backwards. The giving her that extra speed makes her an incredibly fast, agile character. And the 1 has a relatively small cooldown, 5 seconds without any cooldown items. Most people buy cooldown on Chang'e. You can get that. I can get that down to 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, 1, and then you want. And it does a lot of damage. It does a lot of damage. It's a underpowered ability that you want to use for absolutely clearing lanes and finishing off enemies, because the cooldown is relatively short.
Did they take the ability out that ability used to buff your teammates when you hit them with it?
Yes. Yeah, that was the Moonflower Dance.
Oh, right.
And I'll talk about that too, because that got changed a lot. That ability.
No, I thought
it was Crescent Moon.
It was Crescent.
Was it Crescent? I remember Moonflower Dance also gave some buffs to your allies. That if the more people you were close to,
the more
healing you would get, along with they would get something as well. This was a while ago. This was months ago. A really interesting move, and probably one of the few characters that has this is her Moonlight Waltz. So
people thought this was like one of the most OP abilities ever when it first came out.
It is crazy. Now, I remember when I was playing Chung, it used to be a little glitchy. Like, I would dance, and I would be in the middle of the air dancing, frozen by Ymir. So I would... There used to be this little kind of delay on it, but I believe they kind of really fixed it. It's pretty much a free, if you're really skilled, a free Aegis. Because any ability that's about to hit you, no. And you get mana restored to yourself and your allies. So if you're near your allies and you, let's say, waltz an ult, especially from like Ra, you're going to get a lot of mana back. Especially...
I think that's just a part of the ability that people just forget about. Like,
no, absolutely. I mean, it's one of my favorite abilities from her. So she only has, technically, 3 damaging abilities. She used to only have 1. Oh, and then your ult, of course, because the Moonflower Dance didn't heal. But, especially, like, for example, for Loki, if you're listening on your headset, right, you have a headset on, you hear that he's about to come and ambush you or, backstab, ult you, you can dance out of his ult. He will go to ult you and you're immune, you get a lot of mana back, you're Waxing Moon, you won him, Moonflower Dance, and he's probably dead. Moonflower Dance. So, now, this has changed a bit. This used to have no damage on it, but now they changed it. So now, you can heal for a little bit of health. It's a nice little amount. It damages. The important part is the healing reduction. So, for enemies, if you heal around yourself and they're in that little circle, they're going to get healing reduction by 50%.
Which is also why Chang'e is so good with Divine Ruin.
Divine Ruin
against any other healer. It
amazing.
It makes it basically so after you use this ability that the enemy team is basically almost getting no healing.
It is pretty much a near weakening curse every 8 to 7 seconds. For 4 to 5 seconds. There's no slow unless you buy Gem of Isolation on her, but the healing reduction adds a lot of potential to team fights that do have a healer. And then Waxing Moon. Waxing Moon is really interesting because the ult can change. If you hit somebody, they're stunned for 1 second. However, every other god that you hit gets stunned for an extra second. So if there are 4 gods and you hit your ult and you hit all 4, the first one is stunned for 1 second. The second one is stunned for 2 seconds. The third one is stunned for 3 seconds. And the fourth one is stunned for 4 seconds. If you're stunned for 4 seconds in Smite, you're dead. You're not going anywhere. Yeah. I have hit...
But it should be noted that hitting 4 people with this ability
is very challenging. I've done it a couple times, even in Conquest, where I had an Ares and everyone got clumped up and I threw my Waxing Moon out. The last person was stunned for 5 seconds. That's like a lifetime in Smite. So Chang'e has a great potential.
Brings back memories of the Kumbhakarna Yorn, where Kumbhakarna's Yorn, what it was like 5 seconds.
It was like I think like 2 hours, I think, and then he pulled it down because his yawn used to be like forever and like a couple extra seconds after that.
We'll cover Kumbha in another episode.
But yeah, Chang'e's a very high pick in a lot of games. She has a lot of potential, so she'll always be my girl. And then talking about like certain items, that we should add to certain gods or whatnot. We're gonna start off with a couple items. As Pete said before, we're gonna talk about 3 certain items that really add a lot of value, or you may not think adds a lot of value.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll start off with the wonderful and delicious, rarely ever used.
People don't even know that this item is in the game.
Oh yeah, the item. Most people are like, "What is Spirit Robe?" So, why don't you do a little discussing of the Spirit Robe for us, Mr. Peter?
So Spirit Robe is on the tree that the Hide of the Urchin and Magi's Blessing is on, but it's the often much less used version that you can branch off into. So, what makes this item great is that it gives you a little bit of everything. So overall it costs 2,460 gold, so not bad, not too costly. You get a little bit of physical protection, so you get 10 physical protection, 55 magical protection, which is that's a significant amount of magical protection.
That's really good.
125 health, which, hey, nothing wrong with health. 10% cooldown reduction, which is really good because if you're the kind of person that doesn't build, say cooldown boots and like Breastplate of Valor or Chronos Pendant to get the max cooldown or Hydra's Lament, this can pair really well with, one of those items. You're not going to reach max cooldown, but if you pair this with, say, Winged Blade or, any other cooldown item that doesn't bring you to the cap, that 10% cooldown reduction will make a big difference. It's almost like having cooldown boots, which is 5% less. But its passive is what really makes it great, in that you gain an additional 15% damage mitigation for 3 seconds, which is quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So unlike Bulwark of Hope, which gives you 50% damage reduction for 1 second, and I think that only procs like once every minute.
Yeah, it's
So
a
you on
it's
board?
a long cooldown.
And 1 second is, that's like absorbing maybe one ability. 3 seconds, anytime you hit with hard crowd control, so like a stun or, it's not going to proc off of like Ares chains. So any kind of like knock up or knock back or anything like that, or stun, will proc 15% damage reduction shield. And this can occur once every 10 seconds. So that's basically, anytime you get into a team fight, it's always going to be up. Even in the middle of a team fight, it'll proc more than once. 15% damage reduction is nothing to scoff at. So if you're playing against a team like, say, that has an Anubis, a Ymir, and Apollo with that damn Mesmerize, Kumbhaka, anything that has a lot, any enemy team that has a lot of crowd control, highly think of picking up a Spirit Robe. Because 15 damage reduction is nothing to scoff at, and you get a lot of great other stats. Like, if they're very magical based, pick it up. I mean, it's a very underrated item.
No, absolutely. And then like the 55 magical protection plus the cooldown reduction. I mean, you get a lot for a relatively. I mean, it's not really that expensive. It is cheaper than Hide of the Urchin by very little, but definitely situational. But I would look, something you may want to look into.
Keep in mind that Hide of the Urchin is the more efficient defensive item.
Oh, yeah.
So you really only want to build this when you're going to get a huge benefit out of its passive. So only teams that are very crowd controlled heavy. Otherwise, for defense, you really want to look at building Hide of the Urchin.
Well, but don't forget that Hide of the Urchin is a stacking item. So the Spirit Robe is more beneficial to build late game than Hide of the Urchin because you're getting the benefits immediately, whereas Hide of the Urchin, if you buy that late game, it's still a really great item. You're still getting a lot of protection and health and everything, but it's not going to reach its full potential until you get a few kills and assists, which cannot be that, late game, you might want to pick up Spirit Robe instead.
Any cloak item is pretty much really good for so many gods.
I mean, we love Spirit Robe so much we were almost going to name our podcast after the Spirit. We were going to call ourselves the Spirit Robes because we are very strong supporters of Spirit Robe.
Right, Tom?
Yes.
All right, Spirit Robe.
Alright, so the next item is Mystical Mal, which is one of the most overpowered items early in the game and one of the most useless items in late game. And this is one of the branching items that you can either build. It branches off of Iron Mal, which can go into Sovereignty, Mystical Mal, Hide of the Nemean Lion, or Midgardian Mal.
Mm-hmm.
It's very expensive, 2,850 gold, which is the most expensive item. Honestly, that's like one of the most expensive defense items in the game, if not.
And even more so than like a lot of the other ones here.
Hi-Rez realizes how OP that item is, but essentially it's an early game item. So most tanks, like Ares, I rush it on Ares. Other tanks, Bruisers rush this as their first item before boots or anything, because the earlier you get it, the more overpowered it is. You get a total of 300 health, which is really big.
A lot.
60 physical protection, which compared to, what does Sovereignty give?
Sovereignty gives
65.
But, I mean, Sovereignty has the passive, but...
Yes.
But 60 physical is still a lot to have early game. But what makes this item so powerful is that basically, like, every second, it deals 40 magical damage to enemies within 25 units, which is a fairly large radius. So early game, when characters only have 600 to like 800 HP, every 3 seconds they're taking 120 magic damage. It gets scaled down a little because of protection. So let's just say they take about 90 to 100 damage every 3 seconds. That's a lot of damage to an enemy. And it's a huge counter to like physical characters. So if you're going up against like a double physical lane in Siege, this is incredibly potent. But any character that can stick to the enemy, like Ares, or like a Wukong, or anything where you can like chase down enemies or anything like that, this is powerful because you're going to get a lot of extra damage. But it's not just for damage on gods. It clears the wave and buff camps really efficiently because of that constant ticking damage. So this is a great item for tanks to help lane clear with their ADCs if they're not stacking.
And, you know, it's almost, I'm talking about, like, chasing. I've been chased by tanks who didn't even hit me once, and I've gotten killed just from Mystical Mail ticking me slowly. So, I mean, it could be even a great chase item as well when you have that on you, that they're going to be getting ticked for 40 damage.
But
I mean,
one of the downsides to Mystical Mail is pairing it with Blink, because if you damage a god or a minion or anything with this, it's going to deactivate your ability to blink in. So if you're being chased in the jungle and, you know, you have a Mystical Mail hitting you from the tank that's following you, you won't be able to blink out. If you're chasing somebody and you're ticking them from, like, behind them, you're not going to be able to activate Blink because it's doing tick damage. And also, one of the biggest things to consider is if you go under an enemy tower and there's an enemy nearby, even if you don't attack them directly, if your Mystical Mail ticks them for damage, the tower is going to target you and start attacking you because of your Mystical Mail. So keep that in mind.
One other benefit of Mystical Mail that sometimes I think a lot of players underestimate is that it's also a great counter to physical attacking, like melee characters. You have a Loki who wants to get up right next to you and auto-attack you dead. Well, Mystical Mail will be killing him just as fast, because odds are Loki's not building any defense. And this will give you 60 protection.
Magic defense.
Yes.
Magic defense, right, yeah.
And this will be giving you 60 protection against his attacks while damaging him. So it's a great counter for assassin-type characters also.
Yeah,
you can stack this, too. So, like we said earlier, like, if you go double Mystical Mail Rush, like, if you're doing a fun comp for, like, Siege or something, and double Mystical Mail Rush in the same lane, that's double, like, that's insane amount of damage early on in the game. But it's the kind of item, though, where once you get to late game, it falls off. You're probably going to want to sell it and replace it with another defense item like Sovereignty, even though you shouldn't. If you're building like a tank, you're probably going to want Sovereignty fairly early on anyway, but point being, you're going to want to sell Mystical Mail late game because that extra magic damage is going to be it's going to be kind of pointless, and you're better off selling it for even like Midgardian Mail or Nemean would be better than Mystical Mail. So it's a good item. Check it out. Very expensive, though. So typically what I do is if I rush it in Siege, I just buy rank 2 of the Iron Mail. I buy maybe Blink and a couple of pots and that's it, and then I just rush it right after. And next I guess we'll talk about Gem of Isolation, and I'll let you guys do the brunt of that.
So Gem of Isolation, you know, we were actually having this debate before. Gem of Isolation is really expensive. It's $28.50, which, you know, is a hefty price. The passive, well, let me do the stats first. So 70 magic power. 70 plus magic power is great. It gives a little health, 250 health, and it gives 250 mana. But, you know, it's all really about the passive. Passive is enemies hit by your damaging abilities, so only abilities, will move 25% slower for 2 seconds. And I had the debate if it was worth it or not. And I think it really comes down to, like, which gods are really using it. For example, if you use it with Ra, and you use his 2, which if you use near a god is going to slow them. With Gem of Isolation, they're moving like maybe 5-10%. They're moving extremely slow. Ao Kuang, you know, on the tornadoes and on his 1, you know, he can slow them down dramatically. However, I think there are sometimes certain items that I think you could really replace. Because the slowing for 2 seconds, they should be dead in a couple seconds anyway as a mage. And that's why I find, in my opinion, that Gem of Isolation is sometimes really not that useful for certain mages.
I disagree. I don't think it's based on the mage. For the price, you're not getting a lot of magic power. What Gem of Isolation really gives a character is control. You use your AoE abilities to deny space and slow your enemies so that your teammates can kill them. The real beauty behind Gem of Isolation is the increase in health, which makes you a tankier mage a lot harder to kill, and your ability to deny space to your enemies.
It pairs really well with Ethereal Staff, which is that magic item that gives 600 extra health and extra magic power based on your maximum health. So if you're buying Gem of Isolation, highly consider Ethereal Staff or vice versa.
But like, it wouldn't be something I would ever buy on, like, Habwa.
No.
See, like, I think there are certain gods, like, maybe Zhang Kui. if you ever do use him, Gem of Isolation would be good.
Anubis, Poseidon, Kabrakan, this is good on... I buy it on Ares, actually, when I build them down.
Yeah, Ares with the chains is really good because then they're just coming to a complete halt. But, like, certain burst gods are good. And the Ao Kuang, I build Ao Kuang, but I usually
but hitting somebody with your Squall and slowing them is plenty of slow.
Right.
You don't need any addition.
Right, so, and I see a lot of Ao Kuangs by Gem of Isolation because of the Tornado. And I don't do it. I will usually replace that with, like, a Spear of Magnus or a different item. So, I think it really depends on the type of mage or, you know, what magical god you're building, but sometimes I don't find it's 100% useful. And what Tom was saying is the control. That could be really, really good sometimes, especially in, like, Siege or even Arena. But I think it really depends.
Gem of Isolation just works really well on sort of like a hybrid Bruiser Guardian, because, you know, you're always in the enemy's face, and getting an extra slow off on, like, say, Athena or Bacchus, like, that can be really powerful as an item. If you're ahead, like, if you're kind of behind, you're probably going to want to get more defensive items on your Guardian, but if your team is doing really well, think about getting Gem of Isolation maybe as a third or fourth item that can help out your team a lot.
I think the bottom line with Gem of Isolation is for the magic power it gives, it's not very cost efficient. You would want to look to items like Bancroft's Talon, maybe Obsidian Shard. They're a lot cheaper and they give you comparable, if not more, magic power. Mm-hmm. What this really does is make your character a bit harder to kill and gives you some control with your AoE abilities.
Yeah, so that'll about do it for item discussions for this week. So next week we'll pick 3 more items to talk about. Our final segment is going to be... probably a segment that we're only going to do once, but we figured it would be fun to talk about maybe 1 or 2 of our biggest noob moments with Smite. So, for example, when I first started playing Smite, they took this item out not that long ago, but they had an item called Boots of Celerity. I forget the exact stats, but it was an item that gave no benefit to it whatsoever except for move speed. So you got no attack power, you got nothing except for when you were out of combat, you would gain like an insane amount of additional movement speed. So when I first started playing the game, I played a lot of Bastet, and I just thought it looked and was so much fun to just run around as a speedy Bastet in the jungle. So I later came to find out that it was one of the most useless items in the game. Buying pen boots probably would have helped me out a whole lot more, so I got that extra damage off. But yeah, I'll never forget that. I probably bought Boots of Celerity on Bastet for a good several months. On most of my characters, actually. I really liked it on Ymir, too, because of just that extra speed. Other than that, like, there were no other huge noob moments for me where it was like, what the hell was I thinking? I was never one of those players that ever bought Meditation, except for when it was completely overpowered when the actives had passives, and Meditation granted you a passive MP regen that was just insane. You like never ran out of mana. I mean, other than that, I just never really had any that I personally think were stupid noob moments. But we know that Tom definitely had one. Tom?
Well, when I first started, like every new player, I started with Neath. And I would have issues sustaining in lane, and I would always rush items like Ozzy for lifesteal, until the day I discovered that Neath 2 actually restored your health. And
I was playing with Tom.
What level were you when you discovered that?
No, I was playing with Tom, and he was like rank 6 or 7 Neath or something. And I'm like, Tom, just use your 2. He's like, oh, I'm low on health. I'm like, just use your... It's the 2 ability, right?
Yes, it's her 2.
I'm like, just use your 2 to restore health. And he's like, what? He'd played Neath for God knows how long without knowing that she had a heal on her 2.
All those green numbers did nothing.
It slowed enemies effectively. I never realized that it gave you life too.
New moment.
I'm sure Tom has a book full of them, but I guess.
Tom's never done anything like that kind of game. Like I played World of Warcraft, so that kind of gave me just a little bit like of even how to play, even move around. Like this was totally new for Tom. Like he's never done anything.
This was one of my first PC games.
Yes. I mean, we built your PC, and I kept poking him. I was like, you gotta download Smite, download Smite, download Smite. I built this PC for him just so he can play Smite. That's why I helped him do the whole computer thing. So, I think coming in from a whole, like, brand new, you know, I think it takes time. It's definitely challenging.
This game definitely has a high learning curve.
Yeah, it is hard. And it was weird because talking about my noob moment, I tried Dota 2 before I did Smite. And we're not going to have any discussion really about why Dota over Smite, but I kind of, just doing the tutorial and learning about that, I learned about the lanes and stuff like that. But a really, like, a thing I had in the beginning was I needed to get the kill. I wanted to kill the people. So if they were running back to their pace, I remember one time as Naja, I guess like I hit around with a crowd control or something like that, and I didn't look at my minimap, so I started running towards my base. And as I'm in my base, I'm getting hit. I'm like, what the hell is going on? I wasn't obviously in my base, I was in the enemy base, but I think that's happened.
I think that's a problem for a lot of
players.
That
happens for a lot of people. Sometimes you get so confused in the battle, you start running towards your base, and then while you're getting hit in your base, you're like, oh, damn, I'm going to die now. So, I did that a couple times.
You used to buy meditation a lot, especially on chang'e.
Chang'e.
It took you a long time to get
in the beginning. In the beginning, I used to buy meditation on chang'e, especially in 3s, because I wasn't good with sustain. I would just spam out my moves, and it takes time to really learn when you should be using moves, when you should be using auto attacks. I'm sure that'll be something we talk about further down.
Future episode, we'll probably talk about meditation, because a lot of new players. There used to be an auto-buy system for new players, and that was one of the default items. So all new players kind of got really used to sort of like hinging on always having meditation. So in the future, we'll explain why that's not a good choice. It's only really a decent active for maybe like 1 or 2 gods in the game. So we'll explain why that is.
I think it's only really good in Assault.
Well, Assault, it's completely necessary. But like in other game modes, it's probably only good on a couple of gods, and that's about it. If that. But we'll talk about that later. So that about is going to do it for the first episode of the show. If you have any constructive feedback, things we can improve upon, which I'm sure there's a multitude of them, leave us a comment. You can be harsh. It's okay. That's how we'll improve. We're not sure how the audio is going to turn out because, like we said, we're recording this in the same room with one mic. We're using a Blue Snowball. I know Chris, I was looking at audio levels as we're recording, is much louder than all of us, so maybe we'll have to work on that in the future. He's very loud. But yeah, like any segment ideas, if you guys ask us questions about Smite in the comments, we will answer every one on the next episode. So if you have a question, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other than that, that's about going to do it for the first episode. Once again, you can find me on YouTube as PeteDorr. And Chris is also on Twitch as SirCrypt. And Tom is not involved with social media. So there you go.
Alright guys, thank you so much.
Send us invites in-game, by the way. And if you invite us to be a friend on there, just let us know. Send us a message and be like, hey, I listened to your podcast. Can I add you as a friend? And we will add each and every one of you. And feel free to follow Chris. He's starting to stream Smite. You know, it's hard to build a following streaming Smite when you first start because, you know, there's so many Smite streamers. So if you follow him, you know, hang out when he's streaming, I'm sure he'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
You'll probably find us in his chat, too.
Yeah, we'll probably be in there playing with him as well.
Yeah, usually the three of us will be playing together, so, you know, definitely feel free to drop in anytime, ask any questions. We're here to really help build the community even more than what it is. It's really nice to see it go from, what was it, like 1 million to like 3 million now?
Game's getting really big.
Really big. It's now, you know, it doesn't say much when you say it's the third biggest MOBA, but it's
considering how many MOBAs are out there.
Yeah, it's the third biggest MOBA.
It's going to continue to get bigger. And, you know, like we said, we're trying to focus the show on newer players, but we realize that it's kind of hard to strike that balance between completely new players and players that kind of have an idea of what's going on. So sometimes the show might be a little mundane for those of you that, you know, don't need an introduction on what the hell meditation does. But, you know, eventually I'm sure we'll strike a balance between what's too noobish and what's, you know, good enough for your traditional casual player.
I'm pretty sure, like, majority of people don't even know Spirit Robe is in the game.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.